Hi everybody, thanks for joining us today. My name is Sarah. I'm the Executive Director of Office Moms and Dads.
And I'm Marnie. I'm a licensed mental health counselor here in Vancouver, Washington, with a specialization in trauma therapy.
I'm so happy you've chosen to be here because we're going to talk about trauma. Now, trauma is something that impacts everyone at some point in their lives, but especially the little ones we serve each day through Office Moms and Dads.
That's right. The work that OMD volunteers do each day is really hard. When we head down to the child welfare office, we don't know what we're going to encounter. Many times we don't have the full context for some of the behaviors that we see, and it can be a real challenge to keep the children occupied in a safe and nurturing way without causing any additional traumatization for the children or the volunteers.
Our goal today is to give you information about trauma that will help you better serve kids entering foster care, kids who have undergone unspeakable trauma. Our hope is that this information will be something you can use in your own life as well, so that you can maintain a healthy balance between your daily life and the volunteer work that you do. When children are removed from their homes by CPS or law enforcement, they often leave in haste and lose everything they have ever known. The time after a removal, while waiting in a child welfare office, can be one of the most frightening and confusing times of their lives. But Office Moms and Dads has found a way to minimize this re-traumatization experienced when entering foster care. As a community, we have the power to flip the narrative around trauma by providing a kind and gentle adult whose only job is to care for a child in their most vulnerable moment. We are giving their brains a chance to process their pain in a new framework, in a safe space with a volunteer's full attention and respect. During their time together, volunteers play games, read books, and serve as a safe and supportive adult presence. In addition to this emotional support, volunteers provide practical support by giving children new clothes, coats, backpacks, stuffed animals, blankets, and more. Our volunteers keep children occupied and safe, while social workers work behind the scenes to arrange for their long-term care, often having conversations not suited for children's ears. OMD volunteers fill little bellies that may not have eaten in some time, bring tissues where there are tears, and put stuffies in the arms of kids who have had everything taken away from them. We can't fix broken homes, broken bones, and broken hearts, but we have the power and the privilege to hold them up during times of crisis.
One of the best definitions of trauma I have found is from Dr. Bonnie Badenoch. She states, trauma is any experience of fear or pain that doesn't have the support it needs to be digested and integrated into the flow of our developing brain and body. I want to talk about the two main categories of trauma volunteers will encounter while working with these children. They are commonly referred to as big T and little t traumas. Big T traumas are the events most commonly associated with post-traumatic stress disorder, including serious injury, sexual violence, or life-threatening experiences. Threats of serious physical injury, death, or sexual violence can cause intense trauma, even if the person is never physically harmed. Witnesses to big T events, or people living and working in close proximity to trauma survivors, are also vulnerable to PTSD, especially those who encounter emotional shock on a regular basis, like paramedics, therapists, and police officers. Little T traumas are highly distressing events that affect individuals on a personal level, but don't fall into the big T category. Examples of little T trauma include non-life-threatening injuries, emotional abuse, death of a pet, bullying or harassment, and loss of a significant relationship. People have unique capacities to handle stress, referred to as resilience, which impacts their ability to cope with trauma. What is highly distressing to one person may not cause the same emotional response in someone else. So the key to understanding little T trauma is to examine how it affects the individual rather than focusing on the event itself. One of the primary symptoms seen in children is disassociation. This occurs when someone disconnects from part of themselves or from their environment. It can occur in a number of ways, including disconnection from one's emotions, body sensations, memories, or senses. Disassociation related to trauma occurs in varying degrees. For the traumatized individual, disassociation may help him or her to survive circumstances they may have otherwise been intolerable. Disassociation can help a person feel as if situations, his or her body sensations, emotions that would have been overwhelming, are muted and distorted so he or she can then go into autopilot mode and survive extreme situations and circumstances. When trauma is ongoing, disassociation can become fixed and automatic. When this is the case, integration of memories becomes difficult for the brain, and the brain also continues to send signals of danger, even when the traumatic situation is over. This can continue for years after a traumatic situation has ended. The limbic system supports a variety of functions, including emotion, behavior, motivation, and a long-term memory. Emotional life is largely housed in the limbic system, and it has a great deal to do with the formation of memories. During a traumatic experience, the brain detects a threat to survival. The body produces hormones that affect regions of the brain where memories are encoded. The memory of the traumatic event is often fragmented and impaired due to changes in brain chemistry, which affect the amygdala and hippocampus.
Marnie, thanks for that quick look at how trauma affects the body and the brain. It's a fascinating subject. I want to get into some practical tips for our volunteers as they interact with children who are experiencing the effects of trauma. During our initial training with the volunteers, we always tell them to deflect tough conversations in order to keep the mood light. Can you give us some examples of how to engage with kids in the most helpful manner for the situation?
Absolutely. We want to communicate with empathy, so let's remember what empathy is. We know empathy is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. Brené Brown has a great little short on empathy that might be worth the view. Actually, it might be easier to talk about what not to say.
Great idea. Can you give us some examples of what not to say?
We want to remember to keep away from statements that minimize their feelings, such as, "Don't worry, it's not that bad," or "You'll be okay." We have a tendency to feel uncomfortable with someone else's pain. It's one of the reasons why when we are with someone who is crying, we immediately want to offer a hug or a tissue. The problem with this is we are indirectly saying, "Please stop, this is making me feel uncomfortable." Let's remember, our souls don't want to be advised or fixed. They want to be witnessed exactly as they are. So the struggle will be to sit in the awkward with these children, letting them express their feelings, all the while not hearing too much about their cases. This will take some finesse for sure.
I'm sure I've said all of those things at some point, which is why we're having this conversation. It's much easier to try to appease a person that's hurting because, if I'm honest, their pain makes me really uncomfortable. I don't realize it at the time, but by dismissing their hurt, I'm actually trying to make myself feel better.
That's right. We never do it on purpose. Oftentimes, something in the child's expression of grief can trigger the pain of our own past trauma that we've experienced. Now remember, that can mean a big T trauma or a little t trauma. Either way, we need to recognize this is in ourselves and find a safe way to work through it. Some signs that we might have overextended ourselves and are experiencing what we call compassion fatigue would be chronic exhaustion, reduced feelings of sympathy or empathy, dreading working for or taking care of another, feeling guilty as a result, feelings of irritability, anger, or anxiety, depersonalization, headaches, trouble sleeping, impaired decision-making, impatience, and poor work-life balance. If any of these symptoms present themselves, be sure to implement a good self-care plan. That might include spending some time with loved ones, pampering yourself, time in prayer or meditation, or being purposeful about enjoying a hobby you have. As long as it is replenishing and life-giving, it is good for our soul. We want to make sure we aren't escaping, but that we are replenishing.
So you're saying that if I'm not in a healthy place mentally and emotionally, I will have a really hard time connecting with the child empathically?
It is possible working with these children and experiencing what they are going through might trigger something in you. I think being aware of how you are responding or reacting to a child you are sitting with is the first key. Be a careful observer of yourself. If you are feeling something off in your body, honor that. Give yourself some time before you volunteer again. And be sure to communicate this to your volunteer coordinator. If your time in the office is really impacting you, I'd suggest seeking out a professional to talk with. We've learned that if the trauma we've experienced or been exposed to has not been resolved, it will continue to repeat itself in our daily living somehow. Trauma demands repetition.
One of the frustrations experienced by many of our volunteers is that they don't get to see the results of our time with the kids. We can't follow them to their foster home and measure their satisfaction. We can't track them through adolescence to see if they go on to higher education. But when we pair caring adults with children who have been removed from their home, we work to minimize the re-traumatization experienced when entering foster care. And trauma is a key indicator in future marginalization, as it often leads to mental health issues, substance abuse, and more. If we can show children who have experienced trauma that their pain and grief is safe to express, we're helping shape a new framework for them to process their trauma. Instead of being a source of shame in their lives, it can be a catalyst for them to do great things because of their story.
Well said, Sarah. Something to remember: if we do not understand our story will live us out. These children are right in the middle of their stories being developed. So if we can offer them safety and connection, they may have an opportunity to repair and restore that which has been altered by the trauma.
I want to say a big thank you to Marnie Alfson of Riverbend Counseling. Marnie is a big believer in what we do at Office Moms and Dads and was kind enough to volunteer her time to be with us today. If you would like a recommendation of someone you can talk to for personal support or growth, give Marnie a call. She can offer recommendations for counselors in your area. I also want to give a huge shout out to our sponsor, Gen Dev, for this training video. The team of folks there is second to none and made this endeavor completely possible. Finally, thank you for tuning in today. Thank you for volunteering your time and giving of your personal resources to further the mission of OMD. We may never see the results of our time spent at a child welfare office, but rest assured, if you have spent an hour or two making a child laugh, providing for their basic needs, or holding a neglected baby against your chest, you have made a difference. You have physically helped their brains store the memory of trauma in a way that can later be used as a force for good. See you next time. Thanks for all you do.